Imagine you're an ordinary girl, living an ordinary life, when suddenly, boom, you're swept into the palace, crowned queen, and the fate of an entire nation rests on your shoulders. Sounds like something out of a movie, right? Well, it really happened to a young woman named Esther. Esther was a Jewish girl living in Persia, raised by her cousin Mordecai after her parents died. She was kind, beautiful, and full of quiet strength. When King Xerxes decided to find a new queen, Esther, without even revealing she was Jewish, was chosen out of hundreds of women. But being queen wasn't just about wearing a crown and attending royal banquets, would soon require her to risk her very life. Enter the villain of our story, Haman. Haman thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. The king had promoted Haman to a very high position, and he demanded everyone bow down to him. Everyone obeyed, everyone except Mordecai. Mordecai knew he could not bow to any man because he served the one true God. This made Haman furious. But he didn't just want revenge on Mordecai. He wanted to destroy all the Jewish people in the kingdom. So Haman went to King Xerxes and tricked him into signing a terrible law. On a certain day, all the Jews could be attacked and killed, and their possessions taken. It's just like that. An entire people were in grave danger. Mordecai sent an urgent message to Esther, begging her to speak to the king and save their people. But there was a big problem. In those days, if you approached the king without being invited, you could be sentenced to death, unless he held out his golden scepter to you. Even Esther, the queen, wasn't an exception. She was terrified. She could die just for walking into the room. But Mordecai's words echoed in her heart. Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Esther had a choice: stay silent and safe, or speak up and risk everything to do what was right. After fasting and praying for 3 days, Esther made her decision. Dressed in her royal robes, heart pounding, she walked toward the king's throne room. Every step must have felt heavier than the last. As she entered, the king looked up and smiled. He held out his golden scepter. She was safe for now. The king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther?" "Whatever you want, up to half the kingdom, it's yours." But Esther didn't blurt out her request right away. Instead, she invited the king and Haman to a special banquet. At the banquet, the king asked again what Esther wanted, but Esther, wise and patient, invited them both to another banquet the next day. Haman, of course, strutted out of the first banquet, feeling like the most important man in the world, but he was still furious about Mordecai, who refused to bow. That night, Haman built a giant gallows 75 feet tall, planning to hang Mordecai on it. Meanwhile, God was at work. That night, the king couldn't sleep. He asked his servants to read to him from the royal records. He read the story of how Mordecai had once saved the king's life by exposing a plot to kill him. The king realized Mordecai had never been properly honored. In a twist of divine irony, the king asked Haman, what should be done for the man the king wants to honor? Haman, thinking the king meant him, suggested a grand parade. Imagined his horror when the king commanded Haman himself to lead Mordecai through the city, shouting his praises. Finally, at the second banquet, the king asked Esther again what her request was. Esther took a deep breath. With courage burning in her heart, she said, "If I have found favor with you, king, and if it pleases you, grant me my life and the lives of my people, for we have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." The king was shocked. Who would dare do such a thing? He demanded. Esther pointed to the man sitting right there at the table. This wicked Haman. The king was furious. He stormed out into the palace garden. When he returned, he found Haman falling on Esther's couch, begging for his life. It only made things worse. The king ordered Haman to be taken away, and in another twist, Haman was hanged on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai. But the story doesn't end there. Esther and Mordecai worked together to write a new decree that allowed the Jews to defend themselves. When the day of destruction came, the Jewish people stood strong and were saved. Esther's bravery and trust in God changed the course of history. She didn't have superpowers. She had something much greater: courage, faith, and the willingness to do what was right even when it was terrifying. Esther reminds us today that we are placed in our lives, our families, our schools, and our communities for a reason. Sometimes God calls us to be brave right where we are, It's just like Esther. We might be exactly where we are for such a time as this.